welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can download them at ArtistFirst.com. Please send us your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Hi, Z-Man. It was a heck of a busy day today.
Yeah.
You know, these holiday times are full of fear and loathing.
Oh.
To quote the great Hunter Thompson. Anyway, I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And tonight our topic is fear. We are going to make you afraid.
Oh, really?
And the first thing about tonight that you can be afraid about is that this is going to be a special extended show that may go on forever.
Oh, stop.
We may go a little bit over. We started a little bit late, but we're not going to be afraid about it.
No, not a bit.
Not a bit. So tonight, actually, in truth, we're talking. We're basing our discussion tonight on a quote by the Dalai Lama. Actually, two different quotes. The first one I didn't put into the. It won't be up on the website, rather. But I want to start with it anyway because I think it's interesting and illustrative. And then the actual quote, then you can read, and then we'll launch into this. So we'll give them a little cushion of sanity and safety before we leap into the chasm of fear. This is the first quote that I found. I sound unprepared, don't I? I found a few days ago, but then, life happened and stuff. So this is from the Dalai Lama. When we think about fear, there are two types. Legitimate fear, for which there is some valid basis, and fear that is rooted in our mental projections. There's a Tibetan saying that if you let your mind run wild, you'll see a robber in an empty house. And I thought that was sort of evocative of the way the mind, or rather, let's say, the stories that the mind tells itself, especially if those stories are rooted in fear or in anxiety. And let me back up just a little bit, Margaret. Fear is always about the future. The past is generally regret. Oh, if I could have, oh, if I should have. But anxiety and worry, which are just aspects of fear, are always about the future. Now, I think the Dalai Lama does us a service here, because when he thinks about fear, or rather he says when you think about fear, there's a legitimate fear. Legitimate fear is the fear which is engendered by something which requires your immediate action, a survival threat. A car veers into your lane. Well, there's an immediate spurt of adrenaline. Your heart is pounding, your blood is pumping, your eyes are focused, you're doing everything you can. It's a fear response, and afterwards you'll say, that was so scary. Oh my God, we almost got da-da-da. This is legitimate. There was a real car in your real lane coming at you, or something happened, a deer jumps out, whatever. So this type of fear, a fear that is really, in this case, the emotion fear, is doing its job. Its job is to save you, to prepare you to fight or flight, right? That's what fear does. If something threatens you, there's a couple of eyes in the bushes that are trying to eat you, and there's a spurt of fear, of adrenaline. And there can be less existential threats, but there are immediate things that you need to do, and that action of fear is appropriate and legitimate. But then there is this future fear. the fear of the unknown, and then the fear of the imagined known. What could happen, what might happen. What insurance companies basically live on is you being afraid or making you afraid.
It's a whole business based on you being afraid, and how afraid are you?
Well,
fascinating.
How we can, and what's the business? The business is selling you a product which is supposed to assuage or comfort your imagined or possible fear. Oh, you might XYZ happen to you. Well, you better buy this, the 710-3 policy that'll do all these things for you. You'll be great. Similarly, people will say, well, you have to have a plan. You have to know what you're going to do. I mean, you can't just wander through life willy-nilly. Anything could happen. And then people also have the anxieties, the imagined anxieties. Well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what will I do about this? And what will I do about that? And these are the second type of fear. You're seeing, as the Dalai Lama says, a robber, an imagined threat in some place which should be a safe and in essence, non-threatening place. Doesn't Tolle, he goes on and on about how people will lie awake in bed, their mind racing, completely unable to relax because of why? Imagined stories that they're telling themselves about what could go wrong or what might happen, and working themselves up.
Right. Then this is fear rooted in our mental projections. That is the phrase that the Dalai Lama uses. And to understand that you have mental projections, to be aware of what is a mental projection when you are experiencing what is happening to you at that moment. Is it in your mind solely, or is it actually happening around you? And that is something that we're almost trained away from. People want you to live in mental projection all the time. You have to think about it. And if something happens, then you didn't think about it enough. And it is absolutely incorrect, because what that is implying is that if you think about something long enough, you will solve every problem, which is incorrect. To think that way basically means that the field that you're operating in is only bounded by your ability to reason and observe things. And if you're quite honest, do you catch every single thing that's going on around you?
Exactly.
Do you realize how much the brain itself organizes the input that's coming in and presents it to you a certain way? There are many things that you just miss because the brain just shoves it off to the side saying that's not important. So to understand that your mental projections are a separate category from situations where you must do something about it. They want to. Everything gets put into this category of, well, you've got to do something about it. And this is the main reason why I believe the physical body is responding to emergencies and stress continually. It is not a separate category that's been made in one's mind. You can discipline yourself that way. And that's one of the reasons why the mental exercises that they do to quell the mind in meditation or so.
Tibetan exercises or Zen.
Buddhists in general, meditation in general, stress the ability to quiet or still the mind. And in doing that, you begin to become aware of the mental aspect of you and what you're doing and separate it out from the physical. One of the main reasons why in meditation you are supposed to sit still. So there is a separation between the internal mental screen that you have playing in front of you and your physical body. Physical body is in relaxation, but then you are going through something else. You observe things on that internal screen, and you may have a reaction, but at that point you are breathing and slowing things down, grounded in that moment of I am sitting here. And that is something I am observing on this internal screen.
Rather than engaging.
Correct. It is the first step is do not engage in everything that happens to appear across the screen of your mind.
I want to go back because you put a lot into that. But the training part of it is something that I am totally with you. People put this on you at a very early age. You've got to think about these things. You've got to, that could happen and this could happen. And it's entirely well-intentioned, I believe, or most of it is entirely well-intentioned. But then they'll give this guilt trip to you. You see what happened? You didn't think about that. You have to think about this and you have to think about that. And if you think about all these things and that lovely sort of, as long as you've thought about it and you have a plan for it, then it can't, then it won't happen. Or if I worry about things hard enough, everything will be okay.
It'll be perfect.
It'll be perfect. And it belies reality, of course. And it's very fragile. It's a very fragile thing because it's a mental construct. This idea that somehow if you categorize everything and think everything and have a plan for everything, which is right away a conceit, but even if you could do all that somehow you'll be totally perfectly safe. You'll have a plan for everything. And I think it's largely, although well-intentioned, it's largely a waste of energy. And it literally can paralyze you in the actual moment of now when you have an exigent threat or something which really needs to be done this exact moment. I think there's a paralysis that comes over this over-prepared from the Bible, just because we've said this before, when Christ said to his apostles on this occasion when they were going to be persecuted and brought before judges and put into a situation where they're going to have to testify. So don't prepare. Don't anticipate. Don't worry about it, in essence. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Because the words that you need, and Margaret, you've had this exact experience, the words that you need will come. But what you have to do in the exigent moment of now is not have everything all ready to go, because it's like reading up about pregnancy or reading up about childbirth and then actually being there. You can have all the book knowledge you want or all the worry that you want or written down every scintilla of plans and you've got them all at your fingertips. But then when the moment of now hands you the thing that you really have to do, it's all you. And you have one moment to choose, and you can open yourself, as Jesus very, very wisely said to his disciples, don't prepare your defense. My Father in heaven or your greater self, whatever paradigm you'd like to use, will give you the words. The words will come. Margaret has, in our book, would, in moments of great crisis and stress, open herself and say, give me the words. I need to know what this situation needs me to say. There's an immediacy, there's an exigency, but there's also a moment of stillness, like the meditation moment, when you can open yourself and say, I don't know what to say. Give me the words. Give me what I need right now. Give me what I need to do right now. And you don't need to prepare for that. The only thing you need to prepare is to be open in the moment, and in the moment quickly enough to do that when you need to do that.
Well, when moments like that arise, you're not concerned about yourself. Okay, I want to make sure that people understand this, because the minute you go, I need, it doesn't, your ego will interfere and say, well, let me tell you what you need right now. Let me give you the words. It's not the ego that you're listening to, but it is your internal spirit that when you are in a moment of need, and when I say need, your heart is breaking in that moment, and you need a divine touch to be able to handle what is unfolding in front of you. You don't think about yourself. Your heart's breaking, yeah, but it's breaking because of love. Love will break your heart way past any boundary you thought you had. And when that happens and you see a need that is happening in the beloved, your beloved, in that moment, your heart cries out for love to answer this need. And sometimes, most times it comes out in words. Sometimes it comes out in unspoken language. Many times in unspoken language. And sometimes you're there just to hold space so that another can let go. You know how they always say, oh, safe space. I need safe space to be in so I can let go. Well, this is really creating safe space from divine inspiration and not from you. You yourself, as a personality, cannot create safe space for the heart of another. And that is the truth, because the heart will not open to some sort of mental concept, but it will open if there's a boundless love that flows.
Yeah, I mean, and the discipline, if you will, that you need to engender in yourself maybe through meditation, maybe through many other practices, is to be in that moment and train yourself to not be the I. You just said that. Don't be the I need. Don't be the I want. Don't be the I of anything. You in the moment of now, it's timeless. You have the moment to open. The heart opens, the divine connection opens. And then in a selfless, egoless way, you let what needs to happen through you. You basically say, in so many words, the I is shoved to the side. The I doesn't know what to do. The being comes in and says, these hands will provide the needed action. This heart will open and provide the space. These words will come from who knows where. You don't know why you're even saying them in that moment. But they come, and they're the right words. And if this has happened to you on one occasion or another, you're like, I'm not sure why I'm seeing this. But I know at a level, and it's the heart that knows, that this is the right thing to say. When you're saying the right thing or doing the right thing, it's not that it's effortless. Sometimes it takes all the effort you can muster and then some. But it's like the way water moves. It moves the way it's going to move. It doesn't decide to move, it just moves. And you move with that water, with that flow, with that energy flow. You allow yourself to be and Margaret said it too, there's no action involved, but you are the agency of what needs to be now. Needing to be doesn't mean that needing to do. Needing to be silent, needing to be open, needing to be, aground, needing to be just present. Those are all needing to be things. Needing to pick another out of danger of their lives, needing to give someone a hug, needing to say the right words. These are all needing things too, but they're being things. You're not saying, well, I need to counsel them and I need to be the wise one and I need to do this. That's all ego things.
Yeah, no, that's why when we were at Memorial Sloan Kettering in the pediatrics ward, all the mothers would turn to each other whenever one sees that, the social workers are on the floor. So the word would go very quickly through all the moms. Because we knew that, they're there to help us.
With big quotes, help.
And they were clueless on many things. So we were always a bit cautious because we had seen them question some of the parents and what they do, almost trying to probe to see if you're doing it right, or is there a danger to the patient, the child. And I've seen them almost take a child away from a mother because they felt that she may be a danger to this child. And that's a whole other story. But true compassion is something that the human heart responds to. And this kind of mental surface compassion is very nice. Sympathy, I believe the word is. And if they really wanted to be useful, they would take a hand in helping the parents navigate the insurance policies and be a go-between between the hospital, the doctors, and the parents in that particular sense, because that is a outward distraction for most of us who are fighting for the kids' lives. I mean, it's just that was a real need. So
anyway, we strayed a bit from the topic, but I think this was a valid. So this idea that the Dalai is talking about here is related to this. These immediacies, these points at which you're actually in the moment of now presented with a situation which is a threat of some kind, because there's fear involved there. In the immediacy, you have the moment, and I think he also talks about this in other writings. That the ego in fear wants to recoil away, wants to strike back, wants to react, wants to do all these different things. But there's the moment prior to that, or when in that moment when the ego is trying to do all those things, there's still a stillness, a moment when you can recognize that this is a reaction. The ego is starting to tell a story. The ego is starting to react in fear. The ego is turning fear into anger, and all these emotional things that go with that. And realize in that moment, and go into a mode of observation. And this is something which you train. If you're going to train, his training is train yourself to observe the uprising of fear and the beginning of these imaginary stories, the beginning of the ego involvement, the attachments, the engagements, the feeding of the ego's stories or the ego's preconceptions about what this is going to be and how that was going to be, and we should have thought of that, we should have thought of this. All those things come after. There's the immediate threat, perhaps, and then there's the ego's spinnings, which come after. But you can, if you learn to detach at that moment, or to reserve yourself, your being, into an observational state, and say, as the little monk did, there's my fear. There's my old friend fear again. It's rising up. It's going to tell me these stories. It's going to try to make me do these actions. But I've now learned that I have the moment to decide that I will observe my fear. As he said, I'll make a friend of my fear, even in the immediate moment. And then decide from a point of stillness, a point of centered being, what, if any, action I should do. But don't let it be driven by the mental, by the construct, by all the imaginary things.
Well, the exercise I believe he had done was that he was making space for fear and letting it come into the space he created, but letting it just sit down on the side. Not, you acknowledge that you have fear, but it doesn't dominate you. It doesn't control you. Because fear is a response that we do have down here. But if you do not acknowledge it, it will basically come at you and hit you repeatedly because it needs the acknowledgement that it's there. Just like any emotion that you're having. You will not be able to manage it until you acknowledge that it exists. And many people want to say, oh, no, I'm not afraid. I don't fear anything. And there's no place for it. And it comes and attacks you then because it's, well, I do exist. Let me show you how I exist. And then you're possessed by it.
Very much so. It didn't, I'm not sure if it was the same little monk, but in essence, him making a space for his fear was in essence like a basin, like a bowl, like the upwelling of emotion into this place where it could at least fill that space, but then not overflow, not be unacknowledged, but also not, as some people do with anger also, and with fear, choke it off, so that in essence it's like a pressure cooker. And yeah, you've choked off your anger, you've choked off your fear, but it's still there. And the moment you're in an unguarded moment, or even if it becomes overwhelming, it will burst out and incapacitate you, as you said, attack you.
Right. It needs to be acknowledged. And sometimes all this happens and you're in a situation where there's people all around you. And they may not understand what it is that you are experiencing at that point. So that's when you have to take a breath and step away and realize that, okay, if I engage with the outside world right now, I will wind up being ignoring the feeling that's rising and being attacked by it. So for one's own peace, it's best to acknowledge that, okay, wait, this has risen up. And most people don't understand what it means to have something that rises up and is so overwhelming that they can't understand why you're reacting to that. Can't you just do this? Like, well, no.
But I think that's very wise. And there's two things there. I mean, first of all, fears are different for everybody. And secondly, the way people handle them, even an exigent fear, even a fear which is maybe imaginary, but let's just talk about an exigent fear. When it rises up, when the emotion rises up, and you have some discipline, let's say you do know what to do, you still need to maybe disengage from those around you, because they're going to just add chaotic energy into the situation.
Right.
And taking that moment after you've become, let's say, you understand that this is rising up, that I need to deal with this right now. Taking that moment, either in anger or in fear or in some great upwelling of emotion, and there are many different types. You know, the wise person will sometimes step back, not just from within, but also from without. Say, look, I need a moment. Just, I'm going to let me deal with this. And then you have to deal with it in the way that works for you at that moment. If you're very, very good, you can do that while everyone around you has no concept of what you're doing. But if you're not, if you need to disengage, say, look, this is really giving me a reaction. You don't have to say what the reaction is. I need a moment. I need you to stop, to disengage from the rest of you and give me my moment. And then let that come in. Find the space for it. It may take a tremendous amount of discipline, which you can't then waste that energy dealing with others' fears. Let's say everyone else is trying to tell you, oh, we do this, we have to do this, let's go here, let's go. You just take the moment. Sometimes you'll see people do that. Look. And then maybe great wisdom comes out of that next action. You say, no, I understand all this. This is what we should do. This is why. Follow me. This is what we need to do now. But without that space, without that breath, without that internal discipline of dealing with your fear in the way that you need to do it, give it a space. Understand that it's there. Use the energy, anger especially. Use it in a constructive way, where others all around you are trying to be, panic or, want to rise up in rage and yell and scream. You have to give that space and then marshal that energy. It's there. It's yours. If you give it space, acknowledge it, and then put it to some use.
It takes awareness to be able to do any of that. Because most people just fall into the response that they've been triggered into.
Yeah.
And to be aware of that is the first step. That, I've been triggered into a response.
Yes. Very important to start that observation. Tell you what, let's take a moment and go back to the studio. This is a special extended version, so we're not going to miss a scintilla of wisdom. But we're going to have a few commercials and we'll come back.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Hartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Brag Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhum.music.com. And you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Thank you.
Fear not, boys and girls. You're listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Fear not. Yes, we are back, so don't be afraid. And tonight we are talking about fear, but from the point of view of, the person we are quoting and talking about really is the quote from the Dalai Lama. And actually, let's talk about this. Let's bring in the second quote, the actual one that we did post.
Well, actually, I wanted to finish up with that first one.
Oh, sure, yeah.
because he basically is describing a Tibetan saying, which I thought was rather intriguing, that if you let your mind run wild, you'll see a robber in an empty house. Now, how do you interpret that?
Well, I thought anyway that he meant, that the imaginary fears become, to you, real. That you're imagining a robber in an empty house. It becomes a real thing to you. But maybe, what was your interpretation?
Well, I was thinking more along the lines that the empty house is you, and the robber is that part that is always looking for something valuable and going through everything, but there's nothing there because your consciousness is not there. It's fear. Robber is the fear, and it's always looking around for something, but the house is empty.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's one of those old Tibetan sayings, which we're all very familiar with. It's the one about the yak. And everyone knows the yak saying, right? But I mean, I think to say what he's talking about here is that there's valid fears and invalid fears, and the invalid fears are projections.
Well, if you take into account what he said, that phrase before, if you let your mind run wild, it basically turns into this robber in an empty house.
Yeah. I mean, and it is a mental. I mean, the stories that you're telling yourself, stories which are driven by future anxieties, rob you of what? Your present. They rob you of your current now, of your being state.
Right. You are convinced that there is something valuable here, but it's an empty house because you haven't been able to fill it to be present.
I like that. And then to continue with the Dalai, the second thing that we posted, which is a little bit more succinct, if you would. You want to do that one?
Oh, sure.
Can you read it? I can read it if you can.
Fear, hatred, and suspicion narrow your mind. Compassion opens it.
Compassion opens it. And it echoes, what we were speaking about a little bit before. The being state, compassion is a being state. A sympathy is not. You mentioned that earlier about sympathy. Sympathy is I really don't want to be you, or shouldn't you have thought of that? If you had only thought about that.
Sucks to be you.
It sucks to be you. Compassion, on the other hand, will open its. First of all, compassion is a being state. It's a state of the heart. When your heart breaks, when it opens in compassion, you are the other. You say, I am you. I am suffering with you. I want to both share your suffering and in sharing it, make it less. Mother Teresa or just any person who opens themselves to another, and in essence, to use the often overused phrase, I feel your pain, but in truth, that's closer to compassion than sympathy. Sympathy is, wow, that looks painful. I'm going to move on now, but here's a card, and compassion doesn't. Compassion, it sits Shiva, it sits down in your misery and says, I'll be miserable with you here now because I'm acknowledging, I'm witnessing your misery. I'm witnessing as a human being to another human being, saying that there you are in your misery, and so will I be at another point. It's the same point of misery. And I acknowledge that this is nothing unusual. It just happens to be your moment of now, and I'm going to sit here with you in it. That's compassion. And these things...
Yes, the phrase that comes up is there but for the grace of God, go I.
Go I. And in just as in any, the mind wants to say, if you prepare and think about it, it can't happen. Compassion and the beings say that in this moment of now, anything can happen. That you can't prepare for anything. It's crazy. You have to accept anything. If anything is that another that comes before you into your presence in suffering, if that's the anything, and compassion says, acknowledge it, be there with it. Compassion doesn't have to do anything. Sympathy wants to bake you a cake. Compassion just wants to be there. And which one is better in the moment? It's nice to get a little card. It sucks to be you. I'm so sorry. But when somebody comes and sits down next to you over your brokenness and says, I'm here. I'll be here with you, just to be with you. Whatever you need, or nothing, just presence. It lessens the pain. Why? Everything that's happening is still happening, but there is another there to take some of the burden, some of the energy, some of the grief, some of the pain, and just experiencing it with you lessens it. It acknowledges your humanity. It makes you still not into this lonely pariah state of sympathy. Oh, it sucks to be you. Well, the rest of us are going to go off and have a good time, but here's a card. No, compassion says, I acknowledge how important this was to you. It wasn't to me necessarily, but I acknowledge your humanity. I acknowledge your suffering. I know that someday, maybe I already have had, maybe I will have, I will be in the same state, and I would like some other to witness it with me as well. And so you open yourself, and it's a scary thing, if you're going to open yourself to feel someone else's pain, you're going to feel pain. You're going to feel some part of that anguish. It's going to bother you. And it's going to take you out of all your, I got to do this and I got to do that, and I have to, write these letters and do these things. And you can't do any of that when you're in compassion. You just have to be there. Just as the person who is suffering has everything else taken away. There's nothing about them matters anymore except this point of experience. Suffering brings you into the moment of now. Compassion brings you into another's moment of now and lets you experience it with them as another being.
I think people only think of compassion as you just described it. This is a person who is feeling with you your suffering. But compassion means with passion. You are with them in their moment of passion. And that encompasses a whole range of human experiences. You can be in deep compassion when someone is in absolute joy and sharing with you. That's compassion as well.
And I think maybe the word has acquired the connotation because that's easy in some ways. Sometimes it's not. People see others' joy and they react in jealousy. Or they react in, well, you shouldn't be that happy. I'm not that happy. Why should you be happy? I'm not happy till you're not happy. And you see it. You see others who rather than share in your joy want to spoil it in some little way. Some little passive aggressive way. But true compassion says, wow, in this wondrous moment, I feel it too. I feel joy for your joy.
The phrase, I believe, is, I am truly happy for you. And honestly, when you think about it, how many people do you know experience that they are truly happy for you?
Yeah.
With you. and when you think of it that way, it's like, because that's compassion. That is a compassionate heart responding to whatever is presented to it in front of it, around it, in front of it, beside it.
And you can do it with fear too. When someone is deeply and terribly afraid, sometimes our reaction is, as you said before, oh yeah, that's not so bad. It'll be fine. You'll get over it. Come on. It's not so bad. If you really feel compassion for another's fear, you have to understand that to them this is something which is very overwhelming or very real, and you can see it a lot of times in children. Children's fears can be kind of overwhelming, and it's very easy to say, oh, tut, that won't hurt you. It's just a little bug or a little grasshopper. No, if you acknowledge their fear, let them build a space for it. Show them that fear can fill you up to this point, and then it's okay. It's okay to be afraid. It's a scary thing. I was scared too, but this is the reality. Is this really won't hurt you? Or, as long as we do this and we stay back, it'll be okay. And you give them a comforting, as you said, a safe space, a compassionate space to understand that fear felt extremely overwhelming. They wanted to recoil, to react. And yes, you acknowledge all that, but then you say, but here's the boundary of that fear. Just let it build this up, observe it, give them a place to observe their fear from. Maybe it's within you. You say, well, I see how afraid you were, and then they're with you. They're seeing how afraid they were, acknowledging that they were afraid. But it's over now, or maybe it was scary, but it's not, it never really was going to hurt us, kind of thing.
That is the beginning of being able to show that fear can be there, but you're not dominated by it.
Exactly.
And what was funny, there was an incident where we were playing with some stuff that was very goopy. Almost, what is that called? The
Yak, slime, snot, mung.
Okay.
I can keep going.
I was thinking of that strange material that's between a solid and a liquid.
Oobleck?
Oobleck, yeah. But in order to make oobleck, it's cornstarch and water and some other stuff. But to get to that consistency, you go through all the slimy stuff first before you can get to this interesting material.
Non-Newtonian fluid, but yes.
We were playing with that with the 4-year-olds, okay? And it was very interesting because this stuff first appeared like slime, like sticky, icky slime. And I thought the girls would just be running away from it. It's like, ew. But it was very funny because they would touch it and go, ew, it's disgusting. And then go back to it and touch it again. Ew, it's disgusting. And again, they start playing with it. Ew, it's disgusting. And I thought that was so funny because basically it's not fear that was instilled in that moment. It was curiosity, and it's not going to hurt, and it is disgusting, but I'm not afraid. I love things like that where it's like, okay, yes, this is it. Well, I don't want to touch that anymore, but will it do this?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's, again, giving someone the tools to understand that fear can be given space, acknowledgement, and a boundary. It can be given a boundary. People who suffer from, unfortunate people who suffer from PTSD, it's because their fear became something so overwhelming that it touched the survival instinct, that it burned a pathway within their psyche, and that now that can trigger and that emotional charge, which was not contained, nor bounded, nor acknowledged, roars back out again. And this requires therapy. It requires, a safer space and a way to acknowledgement, a way to diffuse that, takes some of that emotional charge away. Because once you've been traumatized, once you've been so totally and almost, destroyed by this fear reaction, it burns pathways into you. Anger is like that too in some ways, but fear is really the worst of it because it really leaves a trail of destruction, a trail of brokenness, and you have to heal from fear. Fear wounds more than anger does. Anger has a different sort of way of scarring the psyche. You can become perpetually angry, or sadness can scar the psyche and make you into depressive and so on. But fear leaves jagged edges. It leaves terrible scars on people, and to be in continual fear is a curse, a terrible burden to have for anybody, any animal, any human being. So teaching, as you just were talking about with the 4-year-olds, teaching as young as possible to be able to understand that fear will rise up. Fear will make you afraid, but you have to, see that it will rise up to a certain point and has a boundary. It has a place where you can observe your fear and realize that, yes, it was very overwhelming. It was very, it really made me feel afraid, but I'm not fear. I felt afraid. That phrase, right?
Right, exactly. I felt afraid. And to be able to identify the fact that you feel afraid as another thing that we were doing, because one had gotten frightened by the other. The other child was very, very physical, very boisterous, high energy, and the one child is just very quiet. So their household is always quiet. So to have this kind of energy just suddenly explode on the scene, she actually hid. And she just, we asked, what's the message? I'm afraid. I'm afraid of, and it's like, okay, I'm so glad you told us that you're afraid. And then let her get through that feeling of fear. It's like acknowledging the fear. And then showing steps of, well, it's nothing destructive. This is the nature of this child. And beginning to make room for other people's ways of doing things. So it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
And I think you made the distinction that I am not fear, because calling, the I am is such a powerful phrase. When you say I am fear, your ego is identifying you as fear. But you say, I felt afraid. Okay, it's still an ego phrase a little bit, but you're saying to yourself at least that I am not the fear, that I had an emotion, which we can identify. This emotion was fear. And I felt in the past, I felt afraid. And you can say, well, look, here's the ball of fear. It came out all the way out to here, but your being was still beyond it. It's something you can't, maybe you don't say that to them at that point, but you can say,
no.
You can step back and observe that you felt afraid. I'm glad you told us that you felt afraid, not that you are fear. And then those small steps are so important at that age.
Yes. Well, it gives them tools to begin to understand what it is that they're feeling.
Exactly. Put a handle on your emotions and give them bounds and give yourself space, make spaces, start to make spaces for the emotions, because as they get older, the emotions get bigger. Right up and through teenage years, they get huge and huge and huge. If you don't have the beginning spaces, it's hard to make bigger spaces later.
Well, it's hard for that transition. I think that's why the years of puberty are so difficult, because the emotions are intensified to a ridiculous degree. And if you didn't have the tools to be able to express what you're feeling, you have no idea what to do. You are just bound up and spinning like a
your ego, or sorry, your being is beset by all these emotions. Well, you know what? I'm afraid that we really have reached the end of the show. I mean, we could probably go on for another hour, but then then Scott would get bored. So I think let's say that I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.